what I'd like to do is slightly different this evening than what we typically do. Typically, I'm all about like chatting in the first like maybe 10 or 15 minutes of meeting. But I get the sense that people are pretty excited about this topic. So what I'd like to do is throw out some ideas, ways of thinking about developing a portfolio. And then at the end, I'd like to open it up and we can have a discussion however you want to have it. How does that sound to you all?
Sounds great.
I'm good.
Okay, great. So let me share my screen. Let me figure out how to share my screen. This is it. All right, are you able to see that okay?
Yep.
Great. All right, so again, welcome to Brilliant Women in Data. We're sort of a subset of Data Nerds. For those of you who are new, Data Nerds is a meetup that's been developed, well, it has been taken over and grown by Glenn Acree as well as his Sam Acree. Again, I mentioned earlier that Glenn and Sam are unable to join us this evening, but and they're very sorry not to be able to meet you. And toward the end, if you want to drop your LinkedIn profile or like a link to your LinkedIn profile or maybe your email in the chat, I know that Glenn and Sam would be more than happy to reach out to you and just see how things are going. They're both really wonderful resources if you're looking for networking opportunities. And Aman and I have been hosting this this subset of Data Nerds for, I don't know, a couple of months now, right? 6 months, 9 months?
More than that. I think.
Is it?
Yeah, I think we're approaching
a year?
I think we started in November last
Okay.
year. Yeah, so
Okay. 9-ish months. Okay.
yeah.
And pretty much the topics range all over the place. They're, you know, the topics have a lot to do with what you're looking for and what we can, you know, if we can find particular people to speak on things. So for this evening's topic, we're going to talk about portfolio development. Let me see if I can advance this. There we go. Also, I just want to thank our sponsors. We have a couple of sponsors for Data Nerds. One is Cook Systems, another one is Sigma. Of course, Nashville Software School, for those of you who are located in Nashville, they're an awesome place to help you transition and learn lots of skills. Bongo, I thought it was, well, I don't know what it was called. I thought it was called something else, but once a month, Glenn and Sam meet at this coffee shop and people can show up. And also, of course, Acree Consulting. I mean, they're really the heart of this meetup. So what I want to do is try to talk about, I'm going to start with a bunch of questions. And I think if you think about these questions and try to come up with answers, I think it'll help develop your portfolio. So the first question is really, what is a portfolio? So it's really a curated collection of your work. It's not all your work. It's sort of to highlight projects that you've worked on. Of course, you want to be mindful if the project you worked on is you can't make public for, say, for intellectual property reasons. But if you've ever done any case studies where you look at a problem and you take it from start to finish, you play with the data, you come up with some analysis, and then you present results. If you've ever done any demos, you might want to highlight some of that for anybody you're talking to. And where appropriate, and if possible, I would recommend that you put this information in a Git repo. And again, that's why you don't want to put private information in a Git repo. And the nice thing about using a Git repo is in your resume or on your LinkedIn profile, you can link to this repo and anybody can see it and go through it. And it's really nice if you can make that page look really good. And again, your LinkedIn profile is a great way to highlight your work as well. You can show your certificates, you can show the courses you took, you can, you know, give and receive recommendations. And if by chance that you happen to write blog posts or articles or see some that you like, if you can always repost them or post your original work there as well. So why would you want to create a portfolio? And I think the biggest reason, oh, and I should have said, Aman, please, you know, chime in at any point in time. I know we didn't have a chance to touch base beforehand, but by all means, as always, you know, I'm fine with being, you know, having people join in.
Thank you.
Sure.
Will do.
So why would we create a portfolio? I think the biggest reason is to stand out. As you talk to people, you want to be sure that they remember you and you want to differentiate yourself. You also really do want to demonstrate the skills that you have, your expertise, your experiences. And by having a portfolio, you're demonstrating real time that you have initiative and drive, and that you can learn and you are learning, and that you have that commitment. The other thing I think a portfolio does for all of us is it helps build confidence. This is really showing people that you have these skills, that you have, the credibility of doing what you say you can do. So with that in mind, what is a portfolio and why would you have one? I think these are the questions that are very important to ask yourself as you start to develop your portfolio. And I think the first one is to think about what roles you're looking for. And for those of you who were there in the beginning when Tamara explained that, she has all this background in music and education, and she's gotten a data analyst role in that field. And I think that's really important to think about. What kind of role are you looking for? And I'll say that it's really not enough to say, I want to work with data. I think many people I've been speaking to have said that if they're able to leverage the knowledge that they learned in their previous jobs or roles, it really makes them more powerful and a stronger candidate for other positions they're looking for in that same field. So I think it's really important to think about what field do you want to do data? Every field has data now. So, you can think of many, many different fields, but I think it's really important to start there. It's very important to, I think, leverage the knowledge you have in a particular domain and becoming a subject matter expert. So with that, I think this is the first question to really think about and answer. And once you consider and come up with an answer for this question, I think it makes each step that follows easier. Because what this is really doing is it's helping you focus. Because data is a big, big field. So once you think about what role you're kind of interested in, then you can start to think about, well, what kind of knowledge do I need? What kind of skills and tools do I need in this role? So right there, that starts to narrow down the kinds of things that you want to learn and or showcase. And so for knowledge, you want to start to understand the vocabulary. And again, if this is a field you've already been in, then you have a great strength there. And again, it'll differentiate you from other people. So, and then you want to, try to understand the fundamentals. And you might want to go so far as to try to find out, well, what are typical problems in that field, or what kind of problems might be solvable with data? And then you might think about, well, what kinds of data are used in this field? And so I should have briefly mentioned my background. I am a data scientist in primarily healthcare. So for me, the language of medicine is what I needed to learn. I really needed to understand things like the fundamentals, like patients, patient data, nurses, nursing data, and what were the problems that typically occurred. Well, besides the obvious things like people have illnesses, but there are other problems such as how do we maximize bed utilization in a hospital? And then how do we maximize nurses' time? How do we make sure that nurses are, not overwhelmed? How do we make healthcare decisions? How do we make financial decisions? And then finally, the types of data, at least for me, are things like electronic medical records. For other people, it could be claims data. For me, it's also medical images. So to understand the role, then you start to think about, well, what do I need to know? What's the vocabulary? And what are some of the basics? And then from there, you can start to ask yourself, well, what language, if I'm going to play with data, what kind of languages should I learn, or packages? So again, for me, it's Python, or it could be R. For many people, the primary language they use is SQL, or Power BI, or Tableau, or React, or Java. So again, all of this is hinging on what role are you interested in, so that you can start to understand, well, what language should I start to focus on? And then from there, you can say, well, what kinds of skills do I need? So let's pretend a primary language for you is SQL. So you might say, okay, well, I know how to do basic selects. I know how to, manipulate tables. But next level might be, let me be sure I know how to do a join and use aggregate functions and windowing functions, and maybe optimizing my queries, and maybe even database designs. So as you can see, with each section, you start to get more and more focused into what maybe you want to be sure to highlight, or if you don't have these skills, what maybe for sure you want to learn. For people who say might be interested in UI UX design, you might be, think, okay, well, I have to know how to work with users and how they interact with screens and inputs, say. You might want to learn about wireframing or prototyping, or, the whole idea of visual design. How do you test these things? How do you gather feedback? So again, these skills are pretty specific, but it has everything to do with what role are you looking for. And then
Super quick
finally,
question.
yes, please.
Hey,
Hi, Lima.
you mentioned, hey, how are you doing? You
Good.
mentioned that you incorporated the use of image analytics in your job. How do you do that? Like, are you talking visualization, or you're talking like CT scans, MRI? What kind of image?
It's more like the latter. It is so I used to work primarily in brain imaging, and so for brain imaging, we would look at things like what part of the brain is in use when a person is reading, or what part of the brain changes when someone develops Alzheimer's over time.
Okay. I might need to like pick your brain a little bit more on this later, but that
Sure.
sounds very interesting. I used to do medical imaging a while
Mhm.
ago, and I would love to go back to that. I'm doing claim data right now. I work for ThinkCare, and
Mhm.
it's very interesting, and I love what I'm doing, but I've been trying to get more into, the data science part of it. I'm doing analytics right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't mean to like hijack this or interrupt or,
Yeah, no,
send this another
that was,
direction, but
yeah, that was a great question, and for sure we should definitely connect,
okay.
a little more, one-on-one. That'd be great. Thanks.
Okay.
Thanks. So once we identify the role and we think about what I should know, and then we think about what language is typically used in that field, and then I think about, well, what are the skills I should learn? And then you can think about, all right, what are the tools I need? So for many people who do data analysis, it could be learning things like Tableau. For many of us in data science, it might be using Jupyter notebooks. In Python, you might want to learn specifically how to use NumPy or Pandas, or some of like Matplotlib. So again, I mean, each one of these sections, as you think about it, the next question gets more and more specific. And I think it starts to really streamline and focus on developing your portfolio. Any other questions before I move on?
I have a comment.
Yes, please.
When I was starting, I did the Springboard boot camp. And when I was starting that, I remember hearing that, choose what field you're interested in. And for me, I found that to be, it caused great anxiety and felt very limiting, because the idea of choosing one thing is very difficult. And what I found is I could rephrase that for myself. What could I be interested in? What might I be interested in? And that helped me open up my thinking. And I found so many things. And what I learned about myself is that I could get excited about so many different kinds of data. And so that really helped me. Just, different personalities work different ways.
Yeah, no, actually, you raise a good point. And in fact, going back to the first question, which is what role, and if you notice, I put roles with an S in parentheses, am I interested in? What I have found in talking to people who are really early in transitioning into data is people are super overwhelmed. And people tell me things like, well, I'm going to learn Python and R, and then I'm going to learn how to do regression and tree-based models and XGBoost. And after a while, it's insane. I mean, you can't learn all those things. It's so overwhelming that people freeze. So you're right. Actually, you shouldn't think about just one role. You should think about many, except for then I'm afraid that will become overwhelming. So what I would recommend, I mean, as you know, to your point, is there are many areas you could be interested in, but I would say maybe start with one. And then once you feel like you've got maybe just one project in your portfolio for that, then think of another role and then come up with another project for your portfolio. And much like, say, my cover letter, when I was, so I've been in a job about 2 months now, two and a half, maybe 3 months now. Every job I applied for, I changed my cover letter. I tailored it for every single job I applied to. And what I would have done if I had a portfolio, should I admit that I don't even have a portfolio, so why am I talking about this? But I would have then, you know, sort of highlighted a particular project in my portfolio that matched or sort of supported the job I applied for. So I agree, you actually should have multiple projects, but in the beginning, you got to start with one. So, but I think that's a great comment and a great observation, especially if that this whole transition thing creates a lot of anxiety. So whatever needs to be done to sort of manage the anxiety, I'm all for it. So thank you.
Yes, and I love the way you say that. If you think of all the things that might be possibilities and then choose one, go there. And then if the opportunity, if the time and opportunity present itself, open up again, look for something
Yes.
else, choose another, but one at a time. For
Yeah,
sure.
exactly.
Yeah. Well, that's I have a follow-up question here. If you were to looking back, if you were to transition again, or if you were to transition from analytics into data science, is there a single course that you would recommend that would be a good way to make that happen?
Again, I think everything has to do with what
Your
role
background.
or roles are you interested in? Like, for example, Python is important to me, given
Mhm.
where I am, but for many people, R is much more important. For other people, SQL is, you know, is much more important. So certainly I could not name one course or one plan of action
Okay.
other than, you know, I mean, this is why there are boot camps that are out there where you can do an accelerated 6 month or a full year. I mean, it takes a good year to learn the basics. And
Yeah.
again, I think what happens is people get overwhelmed, and I'm trying to help with the overwhelming problem with, and what's interesting about this process is, you know, if you do one project, you will then have a foundation and you'll be able to do another project maybe faster. So for example, maybe I start to learn Python. And now that I know how to use Python, then I start to learn pandas. And now that I know how to use pandas, now I can start to build models a little bit better. And so you can just build on each skill as you go. But again, it helps to know the direction you want to go. Like for me to learn Python and then to switch and start to learn SQL, I'm not sure that would be so useful for me because I don't use SQL much at all.
And it depends to where you're coming from, right? If people have different backgrounds, people are more like mathy or more, you know, they're good coders, but maybe don't know the math. Yeah, it's all over the place. I understand that. Thank you. Thank you.
And again, for people who do design, they don't need to know Python at all, you know? I mean, so again, it has a lot to do with what like gets you excited? What do you love? What do you like? Where do you already have skills that you enjoy? I mean, I have lots of skills that I don't want to do them.
Yeah.
Like I could do finance, but I don't want to. So, you know, I don't really consider that. So a lot has to do with where you want to go.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. So then again, I know I keep harping on you want to sort of align to a role or multiple roles or one role after another. And then what you can do is with these projects, you start to demonstrate the skills that you now have. And this allows you to showcase you. And again, this comes back to how you differentiate yourself from anybody else. So if all of you are looking for a job right now, how do you stand out from anyone else? And so these projects also demonstrate the strengths you have, that you can do problem solving, that you're proficient in whatever it is you chose to learn, if it's using pandas or doing wireframing. But it shows all sorts of skills that you have, that you know how to communicate, that you know how to take a project from start to finish. And when you do talk about a project, you might want to talk about, I did this and my next steps would be. You don't have to finish a project to completion, but you can get to a point where you feel like, all right, this is good work. There's more to do, but I'm going to put that on hold. So by showing these projects to anybody, you demonstrate a whole bunch of things all at once. And that, I think, makes you stand out and lets this person see, oh, look, this person has a lot of these qualities that we're interested in. It's not actually enough to know how to program. People are looking for someone who fits into their team well. In fact, one of the biggest reasons I was hired in my current position was because of the other skills I had beyond programming that filled a gap for my team. So you get to demonstrate a ton of things by having a project. And then these projects will help you fill in your gaps. You'll start to, again, thinking about the roles that you're interested in. You get to think about, all right, well, if a typical tool in this role is Tableau or Power BI, let's say Power BI, because I think it's free. You can say, well, I don't know this. All right, so that's the next thing I'm going to learn. As opposed to being overwhelmed, like I'm going to learn this and this and this and this. Instead, you can say, no, this is the direction I'm going. Power BI seems to be a typical tool. I'm going to do a project using Power BI. And it's sort of like taking a lot of little tiny manageable bites out of this overwhelming scenario. Again, trying to manage the anxiety. And then by learning all this, you get to show that you're proactive, you're thinking ahead, you have a gap and you're going to fill it. And you can do that over and over and over again. And after a while, you've got all these skills because bit by bit, methodically, you've been learning all this. It also shows that you're adaptable, that even though you know this, you realize that learning something else would make you even stronger, give you more tools in your toolbox. It also shows professional growth. That's something someone is, an employer is very much interested in, is to know that when you come join them, are you going to keep trying to learn? Are you going to keep, learning more tools so that you can add more value? And then it also shows strategic thinking. I mean, here you are, you're trying to transition that, and you're thinking smart about it. You're trying to make an impression. You're thinking smart about it. You're trying to gain skills and tools. You're thinking smart about it. And again, hopefully this is a way to make you stand out from anybody else. And again, I think it builds confidence. I will say that, I hope this doesn't sound too weird, but people have asked me, how do I prepare for interviews? And I'll be honest, I don't. I just don't. I mean, other than like reading about the, researching about the company and what they do and all of that. But like, I don't sit down and like reread how do I do an XGBoost model. I just have done it. And so I don't have to worry about it. It makes me really comfortable and confident. And I think, again, the more projects you do, that the same will be true for you. So before I move on, quick, anybody have any questions? Okay. So now with all of these thoughts and all of these questions, and hopefully you come up with some answers. It doesn't have to be one answer, it can be multiple answers, but eventually you do want to sort of go in one direction. So now it's time to choose a project. And again, so what is of interest for you? And for most of us doing these projects, we're doing them on like our own like free time. So you really want to choose a project that is of interest to you, because if it's not interesting, you're not going to do it. So do try to pick something that not only will you learn a skill, but you'll be dealing with a question or data that is of interest to you. So again, does this project align with the roles that you're thinking of? Will this project allow you to demonstrate the things you've learned, the knowledge base, the skills, the tools? Will this project fill a gap? Is the project a manageable size? So for me, there's nothing more, nothing bums me out more than to take on a project that I find is just beyond me. It's too big. It feels like it never ends. And then I just give up, and that makes me feel really crummy. So when you pick a project, pick something that's, it doesn't have to be big. It really, really should be manageable, something that you can finish so that you can say to someone, I took this from start to finish. You want to also be able to manage your time. I mean, a lot of us are multitasking quite a lot. A lot of us have a lot going on in our lives. Some of us are still working full time while trying to transition. So you really want to be sure that, you have time to do this. And if you don't have time to do this, either make time or just wait until you do. Again, we want to manage any anxiety that's out there. So now that once we've chosen what we hope is an optimal project, then it's time to do the project. For me, this is the funnest part. I think doing a project is the funnest part. I love completing things. I love checking things off my list. And this is one of them. And then, once you do this project, once you complete it, you want to show it. You want to show it to people. And there's a wide variety of people you can show this to. One of the things that could be useful is to show it to someone who has no idea what, data analytics is all about. And you might want to show them, this is the problem and this is the results, to see if, can you tell that story? Because storytelling is an important part of pretty much everybody's job, but especially when we are dealing with data. So you might want to show your project to someone who's not really in the field to see if they can get it. But you also might want to show it to people who are more technical, and they may say, oh, that's really great. Have you thought about this? And in a way, you can either say, no, I didn't think of that. Let me do that. Or you can say, oh, I'll put that on the list of future work. You don't have to do it, but you should be aware of it. And so again, if you can explain it this way, when you talk to, say, in an interview, if you can explain it to someone who's not in the field and to someone who is in the field, you should be able to explain it pretty well with what I hope is good confidence in an interview. And so you'll be able to explain what the problem is, why it needs to be solved, what methods you used, what tools you use. And then you don't want to just show a plot at the end. You want to be able to show that plot and interpret the results. And you can say, this data, my analysis on this data suggests X, Y, Z. And I think that's a really outstanding way to showcase yourself to a prospective employer. And you want to highlight this. You want to put it on your LinkedIn profile, perhaps if it's in a Git repo. You probably want to add it to your resume. So, you go through all this work, it gives you lots of skills, and you want to show it off. And I think that's a great way to go. And then you can build on this. So like I said, you can get feedback from people. They can say, I didn't understand what this is about. Or someone with more tech can say, have you considered this, that, or the other? And you can either do it, put it in future work, or maybe even make it part of the next project you do. Like, for example, in Python, there are a lot of pretty plotting packages. In the beginning, for me, I used the boring one. It's called Matplotlib. But over time, I would see all these cool plots that were done with Seaborn. And I was like, oh, I want to be cool. I want to be one of the cool kids and use Seaborn. So over time, one day I was like, all right, in this project, I'm using Seaborn. I'm just going to do it. And so that's how I learn a lot of things, is I say, this time around, I'm going to use a different tool. So any questions? So I'm about almost halfway through. Just wanted to see if anybody has any feedback or questions before I move on.
Do you want to do it for text or for voice?
If you have questions, please just go ahead, ask it.
All right. Yeah. Do you ever have
to be honest, I can't see chat right now. So.
Okay. Yeah. I've always had it. Like, I've been trying to get in the coding part of data analytics for years. I always felt like without a formal schooling, it was always trying to get in for the initial part. Like right now, I'm just trying to get a database set up and hooked up the Python and stuff like that. So I can, I actually understand the basics the basic queries of SQL more than that. But I think it's just I think it's a big thing about managing for me, how I say it, is about keeping up that confidence. And as someone's entering into this, and also just how outside the technical stuff, how you can make connections especially if
mhm.
it's not within your job.
Right. And so, you know, the things you point out, which are the things of, you know, how do you get to the next step? I think that's a position we're all in. And my hope is by doing projects, these are entrees into showcasing who you are and what you know to make you stand out so that you can make that next step. And as you do these projects, you know, some of those questions that I asked at the very beginning, like what are some of the tools? What are some of the typical problems? You might not know that. So you might reach out to someone in the field and say, hey, do you have 30 minutes? I'd really like to ask you, like, what are the typical tools you use? What are common problems? What do you think are skills that someone should really know? So not only are you asking them to answer your question about, you know, eventually what project should I do, but you've just made a connection. And so I really do believe that working on projects for a portfolio is really an amazing tool for a number of reasons. You can connect to people, and now you have a real, you know, real information you want to get from this person. You also are thinking about, well, what do I want to do? What am I interested in? What tools should I learn? And then if you make your project doable, there's this real idea of, wow, I accomplished this. And then you can go show it off. So hopefully this idea of doing a project and maybe another project and then another project will help you build the confidence, keep the anxiety at bay, and make you, as you get, I mean, you can't but be more skilled as you do more projects. And then eventually someone will say, that's awesome. This is very interesting to me. I am looking for, let's say, an entry-level person, and this is awesome that you know these skills already. Great. So hopefully this will help you somewhat.
Something that I have found out is that it's a good idea to start building your documentation from the start. There's a lot of employers that look back at your documentation, even if your coding skills are not amazing. If you have a really nice way to tell the story in writing too, like, you know, you document like the stuff that you do that is pertinent to the project, they like that. They like seeing that. And, you know, even if they might not, you know, consider you for some of the coding, if your coding is not strong, they might consider you for other jobs in the company if they know that you have good organizational skills.
Yeah, good point. Very good point. And in fact, when I mentioned you know, at the start, where if you could put your project in a Git repo, that would be ideal. I mean, not all projects really work with that, but if you do, there is a way to really document things beautifully so that people can see, you know, what you did, why you did it, what tools you used, and what your results were. You can do that quite, you know, pretty well in a Git repo. You could also create, say, a Word document or a PowerPoint slideshow and save it as a PDF. And you could put that in a repo or link to it in your LinkedIn profile. So you're right, and Hilma, it's really nice to be able to document and show and demonstrate that you can communicate. Any other questions or comments? These are great. Actually, let me look in the chat, see if anybody has said anything that I should have mentioned. Great. I'm so glad that people have posted their LinkedIn profile. Thank you. Connect. Awesome. Connect. Yes, great. Hey, recent Bandy PhD graduate. Congrats. I graduated about 6-7 years ago. Yep, great. Connect. Wonderful.
I don't think there are questions. I'm more than
Okay.
they're connecting.
Okay. Yeah, I guess Aman, you would have helped me with that. I'm sure you would have. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I copied all of these so I
Okay.
can save them. So
All right, great. And I will just repeat again, for those of you who've shared your contact information, I'm sure Glenn and or Sam will reach out to you because again, I know they're sorry to miss this evening's conversation. So one of the other, so I want to shift gears just a tiny bit. It's still talking about projects, But the question I get asked a lot is, well, where can I find data? And the thing that comes up almost immediately is people will say, I know I can find data in Kaggle, but one of the criticisms about using data from Kaggle is that the data is already cleaned. And in a job, you never get clean data. In fact, I've heard a statistic that says a data scientist will spend about 80% of her time cleaning data, dealing with data. And I know there are days when I spend 100% of my time dealing with data and nothing to do with data science. So being given like a very clean data set, like about the Titanic, sure, you can do statistics and build models from that, but the data was clean. How do you deal with messy data? So you might be interested in some real world data sets. And I'll also pause here because I know the question is going to come up. Will we share this presentation afterwards? And the answer is yes. I'm about to show you a whole bunch of links to different data sets. So you do not have to scribble them down, or, you can take a screenshot if you want, but we will absolutely share this presentation with you so you don't have to write things down. So here's some general places, areas where you might consider looking for some real world data. So there are government databases. There's database data from the US government. There's some from the EU. There's some specific to the UK. So again, looking for data, it's easier to look for data if you've thought about those questions that we've already gone through. What are the roles that I'm interested in? What are the skills? What are the problems? What are my gaps? What is my project? Then you can start to look for data. But here's some sites. There are many universities and research institutions that'll share their data. So this is the first page of 3, and there are many, many other places, but you can see Harvard, Stanford, MIT, Cornell, Yale, Carnegie Mellon, Berkeley, Oxford. So depending on what you're looking for, you can probably find it, and you probably can find it outside Kaggle where the data is already clean. Hopefully you can find, and I will admit, I did not go to all of these links. So if there's some that are broken or dead, please let me know and then I'll update this. If you're interested in financial or economic data, you can go to the Federal Reserve, there's Quandl, and then you could go to World Bank and look for some of their data. Again, it depends on what area you're interested in. If you're interested in web development and UI UX, you can look at some of these data sets that are JSON records to help you play around with this UI UX work using, and the second one would help you practice RESTful web services. So again, depending on your role, depending on the gaps you're trying to fill, depends on what kind of data you look for. If you're looking for something for machine learning, you can look at Kaggle. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. In fact, it has a ton of data. Google also has a bunch of data as well. And then there's a whole bunch of other like specialized sources. Again, I mean, I'm only touching really broadly, but as you start to focus on the answers to the questions, you get a more and more focused idea of what kind of project you want to do. And then you get a sense of what kind of data you need. You might, look in more specialized places. AWS has a ton of data. They make it so it's easy to access if you have an AWS account, but I believe there's a way to extract it, but their data sets are usually huge. So you might want to take like a subsample. You can look at the CDC for public health data sets. And then there's Gapminder. I'll talk a bit about Gapminder toward the end. And again, if you're interested in visualization, there are a lot of galleries out there that you might look at. So for me, lots of times when I'm kind of at the end of my analysis and now I want to present it, in my head, I think, well, how do I show this best? I will sometimes go to these galleries and just look at the plots and think, does my data fit in that kind of way? And does this visualization make it easy to understand my data? So for those of you who are interested in visualization or who are interested in visualizing your results, looking at some of these websites might be helpful. And there's 3 pages of this. I go to the Python Graph Gallery all the time. I mentioned Gapminder again, and it's important to mention Gapminder for those of you who don't know about Hans Rosling. Unfortunately, he died about 7 years ago, but this guy is amazing when it comes to visualization. If you've not ever seen any of his TED Talks, I completely recommend that you go to this first link. There's a bunch of his talks. One of the most, I want to say, famous talks he's given is this one. It's called The Best Stats You've Ever Seen. This guy, I mean, his graphics are amazing, and he himself is a great communicator, and he's extremely enthusiastic. So, you know, if you have like 10 minutes to spare one evening, I highly recommend you, at the very least, look at this bottom link. And that'll give you a sense of what visualization can really be. So in the end, you want projects that'll tell your story. You want to touch upon why this role in this field. You want to talk about what problems did you solve? What value did you add? What knowledge and skills did you gain? How do you think? How do you approach things? And then this helps identify where you are now and where you want to go next. In fact, every job I interviewed for, I would explicitly say, these are the skills I have, and this is how I can help you. These things that you offer, I don't know, and I do want to learn that. So that's a good match for me. So when I interview, it's not all about like me filling their role. It's important for me to learn from them as well. So it's important to think about where you are now and where you want to go next. And when you think about where you want to go next, you need to think about, well, how am I going to get there? Because if you think you're going to learn all this stuff every evening after you work all day, it just doesn't work. It doesn't work for me. I'm tired at the end of my day. Even though I have all the best intentions, I usually don't spend my evenings doing these little projects. I don't. So it's just some final thoughts here. Be kind to yourself. Don't try to do all the things all at once. There's just so much to learn. And so if you can try to focus, I'm not saying, you know, close a door on some ideas. I'm just saying acknowledge those ideas, but then start to move toward one direction just so you can complete something. And if you just work incrementally, you finish one project, don't make it too big. You can move on to another project. Again, don't make it too big. But it helps if you've identified a field in which you're interested, or multiple fields. And then this can help you with interview. This way that you know what you want to share about yourself. So a lot of times when in an interview, often they ask you, do you have any questions? Yeah, I always have questions. And but what you want to do is be sure that you have the chance to say what you want to say about you, even if they didn't ask you. So you can ask a question that in the end would say, I want to know about X because so far I know about Y. So the more of these projects you do, the more you can highlight them and then use them as a jumping off place. You can use your projects as an anchor, as a sense of security and confidence, and then leap off from there. And then this allows you to ask a whole mix of questions. You can ask open-ended questions like, what kind of projects do you have out there? Where do you see you all going in a couple of years? Where do you see someone like me in your group going in a few years? Or you can ask really specific questions like, do you have the data to do what you want? If you don't have that data, how are you going to get it? And when are you going to get it? And then you can say, I know this and I want to learn that. How can that happen if I join your team? So I think doing these projects really gives you a sense of, I hope, a sense of confidence, and that you can build on it in many, many different ways. So I think that those are all the thoughts I had for this evening. So I'd really like to open it up and hear if you have any thoughts, other ideas, questions, anything. Because we have about 5-10 minutes.
I would like to add that no one knows everything, so don't expect to know everything. And it's a continuous learning process, especially when you get to the data science and technology and machine learning and AI and all of these things. It's just people are inventing methods and ways to do things all the time and tools. And I think one of the most important skills here is multiple skills, I would say. Resilience, like be willing to accept that you don't know and learn. And the second thing is enjoying learning, because if you don't enjoy like updating your knowledge and keeping up with all of what you have in the field, it's going to be kind of a challenging role to go into data science, because you need to learn more. So if you enjoy learning, that's great. That's your start, and don't underestimate yourself. Just try to do it, as Betty Ann said, incremental steps, because you don't want to have a bigger bite and then you just scare yourself off the field. So just start with little things. I would say about the comment about I think Tamara, when you mentioned about being scared of being told to specialize, it's not kind of, I don't think they mean specialize forever. I think they just mean, for your first job, to get your leg in the field, you definitely need for interviews to know the data, because I'm not going to say companies are lazy, but it's easier for them to hire someone who knows the data versus someone who doesn't know, because they don't want to train you. Like it's easier, like it makes it quicker for them to hire someone who can add value faster than anyone else. Like, for example, in healthcare data, if you don't know what an ICD-10 is, it's going to be hard for people to hire you to look at the data. You don't understand that. It's a common, a basic, important concept, certain metrics. So how are you going to evaluate the data? Yeah, definitely that your ability to learn, that's great. Like if you worked in another field with that other data, you can always like put an emphasis on like the transfer learning, like I have these metrics and I can see them applied in the other field. But for the first job, I would say having knowledge in some data, like specifying, going with one domain knowledge would be helpful a lot in interviews.
And be careful with your own, I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
No problem. I just wanted to respond that I completely agree with that. For me, what was overwhelming was trying to decide one field that I might be interested in when I'm transitioning for something completely different. And then without having peeked into a few different fields first. So I just needed to try a few things and then pick.
Yeah,
I agree. That's important. Yeah, I agree with that. Like, you mean the role, like in terms of data science or data engineering? Is that what?
No, I mean, like when I was choosing a data set for my first project, and I was told, well, pick a data set that would be most interesting to you, or a field that's most interesting to you. And I thought, well, all I know is music and education. What do I even try? So I picked a data set that I did not know I would fall in love with. It happened to be in transportation, and it ended up being one of the favorite things I've ever done, because I discovered something completely new. So what I did for my first several projects was just choose a completely different field each time. I experimented, and then I found what my interest was and my passion, and then went in that direction.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I mean, that's awesome, especially in the learning context, that helps. But I think when you apply for a job, that's harder. You need to be more focused. And I think my comment was on a job side, not on the learning.
Absolutely.
On the learning side, we have more freedom to do other stuff.
to add to that, it almost feels like you have to be heavily marketing yourself. When I broke into healthcare analytics, it was really hard because I'm a trained physicist and everybody was kind of wary of that. I didn't catch that at the beginning until one of the interviewers asked me just point blank, do you know you're not going to be working in a lab here? What do you think physicists do? But it's interesting. You just have to like sell yourself, and the skills that you can bring to the company, just make sure you show them to them. I think that's important too.
So I kind of had a question on that, learning your industry specific and choosing your projects. I've worked for 7 years in education, and other than education, I've done a little bit of work with law enforcement dispatching. Other than that, I have lots of community and family ties with agriculture, but it's very non-techie agriculture. My work has been more boots on the ground. So since I don't have that background in business or economics or the technical business world side of agriculture is my first pick for where I would want to work, but I don't know what kind of problems I'm able to solve with data science. How do you recommend learning that professional side of an industry? Because I really don't have that background in any industry. So if I'm choosing one, I'd rather
Yeah.
agriculture. I just don't know how to learn that end of it.
Right. And your question is perfect for this conversation. It's perfect because I think that's where we find ourselves all the time is I have interest, but I don't know the nuts and bolts. And so I think part of that is a couple of things. I mean, you can Google it, but I honestly believe that if you can find someone in that field and reach out to them and say, I have a little bit of knowledge in this area, but I'd really like to know more. I really, I like data. I want to play with data. What kind of data is in this field? What are the typical problems in this field? What are the problems that you're trying to solve? Or what are the problems that you wish someone else would solve? So I think reaching out to people and asking them, what do you do? What skills, what tools, what knowledge do you have? What problems do you wish someone would solve? I think will start to give you a sense. And if you talk to multiple people, if you're lucky, they'll all say, I use the same tool and the data is often in, about X, Y, and Z. And a typical, like, for example, in my previous job, I worked with proteins. Well, it turned out there was a specific format of proteins called smiles, literally. So I was like, oh, what's a smile? So once I learned about smiles, then I was like, okay, I can do this now, or at least I know how to manipulate the data now. So if you're lucky, everyone will say, oh, well, most of the data we deal with are in smiles format. And you're like, okay, I guess I better learn about smiles. So I really think talking to people is what's going to help you. And then that gives you a connection.
That's a great way to frame this question. Thank you.
So that was a great question.
Dana, Sri, do you have a question or a comment?
Yes,
Go ahead.
yes. I wanted to say something. So first of all, thank you so much. And I couldn't agree more. Portfolio projects are the most important part of job hunt. When I did my portfolio project, and I was always interested in healthcare, even though right now I'm working as a sports analyst, sports betting company analyst. So it's a totally different domain. But that portfolio project got me the job I'm working at right now. So that was the highlight of it. And while doing that project, keep in mind how do you want to visualize it? Little attention to details. All those things are very important to employers because that was the important part while hiring that. They wanted to do something in Tableau where it is called dashboard in dashboard, and that was the part which got me the job, like highlighting and dashboard in dashboard. Like when you click on something, it takes you to something else. That was the most important part for the manager, and he wanted to do something like that. So how do you want to visualize it, and how you want to highlight your skills in that? And it will come together, but you can ask for any help. If you are stuck with Tableau, I can definitely help you out. So just wanted to add that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I think a nice point that you raised kind of supports what I'm trying to say, which is pick projects that are little enough, because there are so many aspects. One is you do want to do a good job and you do want to present it well. But if the project is too big, if I get tired, I'm not going to do that extra polishing. I'm probably not going to write it up very well. I'm probably not going to take the time to come up with a pretty plot because the project, I'm just so over it. But if I pick a little project, even if the project is, I want to learn how to do this kind of plot, that's a good project.
Hi, this is a question for Betsy.
Mhm.
In the PowerPoint presentation that you have, that you're going to send, do you have your contact information there?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I can add it, or you can find me in LinkedIn. And so again, I will say again, all the contact information that you shared, that will get to Glenn and Sam. If you want to reach out to me, I won't speak for you, Ramon. Feel free to reach out to me. I mean, if it makes sense to have a one-on-one conversation, let me know. We can try to work that out.
Yeah, I
And,
just don't want to waste time here because I have a specific question. So
Okay.
to save time for other people.
All right, great, good. Yeah, so I'll definitely add my contact info. And let me make a note of that. Okay, so time's just about up. Any final comments? I'm glad you tuned in too.
Thank you so much, Betty Ann. It was great. And yeah, I can see there are more, is that more LinkedIn? I want to copy those. But yeah, it was awesome. And maybe next month we'll have a speaker. I'm not sure yet.
Okay.
So just stay tuned.
Stay tuned.
I'm going to actually talk to her tomorrow. So, and I will let you know
That'd
who
be
is
great.
it and what the subject is. Yeah, but I'm not, she agreed in talking, but I don't know which month and what the topic is. So
Okay,
that's that.
that sounds great. Well, it was nice to see you all. It was nice to meet those of you who are new. I'm glad you could make it, and I hope we have a chance to connect again.
Yeah, we would love that.
Thank you, Betsy.
All
Thank
right,
you.
thank you.
Thank you all.
Mhm.